This presentation covers the life of American author Ernest Hemingway, who lived from 1899 to 1961. Ernest Hemingway was born in Oak Park, Illinois, a suburb of Chicago. His father was a wealthy physician and passed on to his son his love for hunting and fishing. After graduating high school in 1917, Ernest Hemingway worked as a reporter for the Kansas City Star. Since he was rejected from Army service for poor vision, Hemingway volunteered as an American ambulance driver in France during World War I. He transferred to the Italian front, where he became the first wounded American to survive after being hit with a mortar shell. He was decorated for valor, which he believed he did not deserve. After his recovery, he returned home, taking a job with the Toronto Star, working as a foreign correspondent covering the Greco-Turkish War. He then returned to Paris, which after World War I became a city full of intellectual life, creativity, and genius. In Paris, Hemingway wrote along with Gertrude Stein, Ezra Pound, T.S. Eliot, and James Joyce, and he helped contribute to a revolution in literary style and language, with his succinct reportorial prose based on deceptively simple sentence structure, which used a restricted vocabulary, precise imagery, and an impersonal, dramatic tone. He published his first book, 3 Stories and 10 Poems, while in Paris in 1923. 3 years later, he published his novel, The Sun Also Rises, making him the spokesman for the men and women that Gertrude Stein had named a lost generation. Hemingway's work has been read as a negative commentary on the modern world filled with sterility, failure, and death. However, his nihilistic vision is modified by his affirmative assertion of the possibility of living with style and courage. His primary concern was an individual's moment of truth, which he derived from bullfighting, and he was fascinated by the threat of physical, emotional, or psychic death, a fascination reflected in his lifelong preoccupation with stories of war and death, shown in his novels A Farewell to Arms, For Whom the Bell Tolls, Death in the Afternoon, and Green Hills of Africa. Hemingway felt a person's greatest achievement is to show grace under pressure, or what he describes in The Sun Also Rises as maintaining the purity of line through the maximum of exposure. Hemingway rejected the romantic ideal of the union of lovers and suggested instead that all relationships must end in destruction and death. He shows a farewell to both love and war in his novel A Farewell to Arms. In 1937, Hemingway became a foreign correspondent covering the Spanish Civil War, and 3 years later published his novel For Whom the Bell Tolls, based on his experience. This novel is set in Spain during the Civil War and uses his popular theme of love found and lost, and also describes the unshakable spirit of the common person. He wrote another novel with a similar theme in 1952, The Old Man in the Sea, about an old fisherman named Santiago who is triumphant even in the face of defeat. 2 years later, in 1954, Hemingway won the prestigious Nobel Prize for Literature for his contributions to modern narration. Hemingway's fame brought him critical scrutiny throughout the world. Numerous parallels between his life and his characters exist, but none as pronounced as that of Richard Cantwell in his novel Across the River and Into the Trees, whose attempts at stoic control of physical and mental illness foreshadow the struggles and defeats of Hemingway's final years, which sadly ended when he, just as his father had 30 years earlier, committed suicide on July 2, 1961. The information from this PowerPoint is from the Anthology of American Literature, Volume 2, 10th edition, and all images are taken from Google Images.